Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And what a pleasure to get to be with you all today, if only by Zoom. I had the pleasure of being down in your community a year or so ago, and I hope I'll be back before long because it's obviously an important place in all these fights. Um, Look, it's obviously been a hard and traumatic week for everybody. And the solace for me has come, as it usually does, from being able to get out in the woods and wander around a little bit. The leaves are now coming down in Vermont, but I bet that they are turning as beautiful as they get in Connecticut. And I hope that you're all able to take some solace in the natural world as well. I think the burden of what I want to talk with you about tonight is the fact that the natural world is a construct that doesn't mean anymore quite what we used to think of it as. This year, 2023, has been a remarkable year. The thing that it will be remembered for historically is the fact that it was the year when climate change finally sort of broke out. The things that many of us have been warning about, in my case, for 35 years now, since I wrote the first book about all this back in the 1980s, those warnings all came true and came true in spades this year. The last 4 or 5 months have been incredible. We have seen the hottest temperatures ever recorded on this planet. Now, our records with thermometers only go back a couple of hundred years, but the scientists have a number of clever ways of extending that back with proxy records, ocean sediments, ice cores, that kind of thing. They are convinced that the temperatures we saw this northern hemisphere summer were the hottest that the world has been in at least 125,000 years. That is, no human society that we would recognize as a human society has ever endured a climate like the one we are now enduring. And it's going to get worse before maybe it gets better. We're in the middle of an El Nino now, a warming cycle in the Pacific that comes on top of this extraordinary warming caused by the burning of fossil fuel. And what that means is that we're already seeing temperatures. September, we broke through the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise mark that we pledged in Paris just 8 years ago to avoid. It's quite possible that before this winter is out, we will have, at least temporarily, smashed through the 2 degrees Celsius barrier. These are temperatures high enough to cause all kinds of havoc, the fires, the floods, and to kick off a kind of endless feedback cycle. The fires still burning in Canada, fires that'll be burning till the snows fall, have put twice as much carbon into the air as all the cooking and flying and heating and cooking and cooling and driving that Canadians do in the course of a year. So we are in a very, very, very difficult place right now. And I do not want to sugarcoat it in any way or provide the slightest bit, really, of false hope. In Christian terms, we are running Genesis in reverse, and we are engaged in an active process of decreation, and it's going at almost the same pace, not quite 7 days, but the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us that we have until 2030 to cut emissions in half if we want to meet those targets we set in Paris. And by my watch, 2030 is 6 years and 3 months away. So almost as fast as the creation story ran the other direction. That's the bad and hard news. The slightly better news is that we know what to do about this. The scientists and engineers have offered us a tremendous miracle. They have dropped the price of renewable energy from the sun and the wind 90% in the last decade. We live on a planet where the cheapest way to produce power is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. That is a water into wine miracle. And so if we were serious about deploying all that as fast as we could, then we would have some chance. But so far we're not. And the reason that we're not, above all, is the extraordinary power of the fossil fuel industry to keep us from changing. They are determined to keep their business model intact, and so far they have had the political power to do it. We think of that fossil fuel industry as residing in Texas or Louisiana or Saudi Arabia or Russia, but frankly, a lot of it resides right there in the Connecticut suburbs. Yesterday, ExxonMobil, biggest oil company in the world, placed a huge $60 billion bet on shale oil, buying out huge amounts of acreage across the Southwest that they have apparently determined that they will keep mining and drilling for decades to come in order to pay off that price. And their accomplice in this work was Citibank, who provided the financing to let it happen, even though many of us have been begging and pleading with Citibank and going to jail for sitting in their lobby for years now, asking them to break with the fossil fuel industry and its endless plans for expansion. So that means that there's lots of room and lots of work for all of you to get to do important things. And that's really what I want to talk about tonight. If we are to have any chance of not of stopping global warming, it is too late for that, of stopping it short of the point where it cuts civilizations off at the knees, then we need to be organizing in order to provide a check, a countervailing power to that extraordinary influence of the fossil fuel industry. We shouldn't have to do that. The warning that we got from scientists 30 years ago should have been enough to rouse us into action, but it wasn't. And so we need to organize, and that's what my life's work in recent years anyway has been about. It's all volunteer work, but it's work and important work, and with many, many colleagues. We started 350.org, the first global grassroots climate campaign that's now organized demonstrations in every country on earth except North Korea. We did manage to defeat the Keystone Pipeline and to spearhead this fossil fuel divestment campaign that's now at $40 trillion worth of endowments and portfolios that have sold their stock in coal and gas and oil, including the World Council of Churches and most of our mainline Protestant denominations, including Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge and Princeton and the University of California and the University of Michigan, including, well, an endless number of actors, many, many out of the faith community. Pope Francis has been one of the most stalwart advocates of this kind of work, and he, last week, issued another, the second of his really epic letters on this question, telling us all that we need to go to work for the sake of creation and for the sake of the poorest among us, the most vulnerable, who are the first and hardest hit by climate change. We are not loving our neighbors. We are drowning our neighbors. We are sickening them. We are making it impossible for them to grow their crops. But it's not impossible to stand up to what the good book called, I believe, the powers and principalities. As we started demonstrating at 350.org, and so many others have joined in this work. Most of those people are young people. I started 350 with 7 college students. We organized this divestment campaign with college students the world around. And when they graduated from college, they wanted to keep on working. So they formed the Sunrise movement that brought us the Green New Deal. And it's because of that that we actually got Congress to act last year with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a modest but important start on the journey we need to make. Young people are working everywhere else too. You know all about Greta Thunberg. She's one of my favorite people to work with on the planet. I adore her. She'd be the first to say there are 10,000 Gretas, young people scattered across the globe who are doing incredible work. As you would expect, because they're staring down the barrel of a lifetime on a depleted and degraded planet. However, I've heard one too many people say to me, oh, it's up to the next generation to solve these problems, which seems ignoble, and it also seems impractical. For all their energy, ambition, intelligence, idealism, young people lack the structural authority, structural power to make change on the scale that we need in the time that we have. Who has structural power? People with hairlines like mine. I can't see all there, so there may not be a single other person in that room over the age of 60. I don't know. But if there aren't, I want you to tell your grandparents about the work that we are doing at Third Act. We're organizing people over the age of 60 because there are 70 million of us, because we punch above our weight politically. We all vote. There's no known way to stop old people from voting. And because we ended up with most of the money. We've got about 70% of the country's financial assets. We need Washington and Wall Street to go to work on this. They will listen to us. The Third Act chapter in Connecticut, which formed a couple of months ago, is doing incredible work. Led by the retired minister, Davida Foy Crabtree. They have been signing up hundreds and hundreds of people and getting to work, Hartford and everywhere else, to make change happen. And that's how change happens. The American default towards a kind of hyper-individualism is a big problem here. When we hear about something like climate change, our first impulse is to ask, what can I do in my house? What should I put in my garage? Is there something I can put on my roof? That is a good response. I'm proud of the solar panels on my roof, and I'm glad they're connected to an EV in the garage. I'm grateful that y'all are putting solar panels up on the roof of the church there. But we are past the point where we can deal with the climate crisis one Tesla at a time. In order to make the math work, we need basic changes in the economic and political ground rules. And that means that the most important and useful thing an individual can do is be somewhat less of an individual and come together in the kind of movements that make change happen. And the good news is that this is something that faith communities realized a long time ago, that it was hard work being a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim by yourself, that it worked best when you did it with others. Well, that's true of citizenship as well. That's what we badly need, and we need it now. Were I a better organizer, were I a preacher, and I've never risen higher in the ecclesial hierarchy than Methodist Sunday school teacher, were I a preacher, I would probably end right there with a kind of rousing call and a promise that we will do what needs doing. But I'm a writer who owes honesty above all. And so I have to tell you that I do not know that even if we do everything right at this point, we will win. There is an extraordinary amount of momentum now in this physical system. The poles are melting, and that is a very, very dangerous thing. All I can tell you is that we are going to fight and fight hard, and that it is a nonviolent but determined battle that we now must undertake. And I can also tell you that one of the, maybe the only real advantage maybe the only real advantage of being a person of faith in the middle of this is that I think we are entitled to hope that if we do everything that we can, that there are forces in the universe that will meet us halfway. That is very different from imagining that God will take care of our problems. That is not how God works, or so it seems to me. But if we do everything right, if we do everything that we can, if we make the changes and sacrifices that we should for the sake of everybody else on this planet that we have been asked to think about, then there is some force that offers us at least some reason to think that perhaps we'll be able to salvage something out of this incredibly beautiful planet that we have been privileged to inhabit. That's why I spend my time doing what I do. It's why I've ended up in jail a lot more often than I thought I would. I'm not telling you you have to go to jail, though a surprising number of people tell me it's on their bucket list. And if it's on yours, then we can help. I am telling you that we need you out of your comfort zone. Affluent suburban America is a tremendous comfort zone. That's where I grew up, the suburbs outside Boston. But the planet is outside its comfort zone. And so we cannot be. We have to be in uncomfortable places, doing uncomfortable things, having uncomfortable conversations, taking real action in order to try and do those things that we have been called upon to do. I'm going to end there because I have another talk that I need to go give, but I really just want to say so many thanks to the leaders there and to everybody there for taking this world as seriously as it must be taken, and to invite all of you, no matter your age, to join in what has to be the greatest of all human efforts. Climate change is kind of a test of whether the big brain was a good idea or not. It got us in a lot of trouble, and now we'll see if it can get us out. And my intuition is that the size of the brain in the end may be less important than the size of the heart that that brain is connected to. That's what we're going to find out. We don't know the answer. The answer depends on us. Thank you all enormously.